This podcast contains content that is graphic in nature and mature language that may be unsuitable for children or young listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Hey guys, and welcome to this very special bonus episode of Sin Law. I'm Kelly, and today I'm going to be taking you into a very different from our other episodes setting here. We're going to step into something heavy and into the shadows of a moment that we've already explored. You might recall from episode 31, the Connie Yvette Smith story, where I shared her story of how she was tragically murdered at age 17 in her own home by a neighbor that was obsessed with her and couldn't take no for an answer. His name was Bryan Brown, but he is not the focus of our story today. Not by any means. Our focus today is on Connie herself and on the family that she left behind. Last week, I got a fan mail through Buzzsprout, my hosting website, and it was actually from, and if you haven't listened to episode 31, stop right now. Go back. Go listen to that and then come back here. Okay? Thank you. So, now that you've listened to episode 31, I initially thought it was the brother, just because it didn't make a whole lot of sense. It didn't add up. There were a lot of things that didn't connect. And my true crime mind said, oh, it's she. But it wasn't. And I guess it didn't come across in the news articles and things that I was reading how close in age and how close in heart they were to each other. Her older brother's name was Bradley Smith, and he was about to be 19. He was just shy of 19 when his sister was taken from him. And lo and behold, last week, I get a fan mail from Mr. Bradley Smith. And after I came out of my gripping and frozen shock, we had a conversation, or a few conversations over a period of time, and he agreed to talk with me and tell me about that night and about his life since and all of those things. So I got the privilege and the honor to speak with Mr. Bradley Smith, and we've been in contact off and on before and after that, just discussing different things, and come to find out, like, my mom, Weesey, and Connie, like I told everyone in the episode in episode 31 that they knew each other, but also I believe now, like, they all had some intermingling at some point or another. Either way, very interesting, very very small world, I guess. However, he reached out to me. We spoke. He agreed to speak with me. He allowed me to record it. And I'm not going to do a whole lot this episode. I'm going to let him speak because I feel like this is something that needs to be spoken and needs to be heard, especially from the viewpoint and from the words and the mouth and the emotion of someone who was there. Because at the very end, you'll see, and you'll hear this more than once, Connie does not need to be forgotten. Her story does not need to be forgotten. What happened that night should never be forgotten by anyone. So, if you take nothing else away from this, take that to heart. Listen to her story. Don't forget it. Pass it on to someone who may need that, who may need to hear this to be able to be safer, to live longer, to be happier, and just to remember Connie. So, before we take the steps off of the into the abyss here, I got, again, the honor of speaking with Mr. Brad, and he is delightful and a wonderfully well articulated storyteller, and very well spoken, very articulate. I can't say enough good things about him. And from everything that I've gathered and from what you'll hear yourselves, there are situations and events in our lives that either change us for the better or change us for the worse. And you would think that having something this traumatic and something this awful, and then just so egregiously unnecessary, happen to you so young in life, that it would forever have an effect on you. And I think that and not just Bradley himself, but their entire family needs to be the gold standard for what you can do in spite of great loss and great tragedy. And that it is possible to go forward and to be productive and to be, contributing member of society, as it were. So I'm going to stop rambling. I will now introduce you to Bradley Smith.
Yes. I was laughing to myself earlier when you said something about recording. I thought, oh my gosh, I sound so hickish nowadays. It's hard to believe that I'm educated. I go, really, I do have a couple of degrees.
A couple degrees is modest. He has a bachelor's and a master's in psychology.
Life takes interesting turns. When I went on my church mission, and I came back, finished up some time over at LC, and then transferred over to Southern Miss and finished my bachelor's and my master's. And during that time, I got married and had a kid. And matter of fact, my ex-wife and I, we were very good friends still, she and I graduated together. She had a master's in speech language pathology, and I was in counseling psychology. And I came back to work in the 80s to do an internship, and worked about a year and a half. And I had an opportunity to work at one place that I swore I would never work, and it was a prison.
Yeah, you heard that right. He grew up, went to school, got a master's, and decided to work in a prison. A federal prison.
Federal facility. Figured I would give it a couple of years. A couple of years turned into 25 years. Did a lot of interesting things there. Met a lot of interesting people. I actually did some time over at Pollock at that federal complex, but what I did over there, I was on the crisis negotiation team for both my 25 years. I was 23 years on that. So I did, my psychology job, did the crisis negotiation. So it was a good experience. It was a wide variety of things to do. Made a lot of great friends, and now I'm actually working again after we've retired and all got old. I had been wanting to connect with these guys over the years, but I've been raising grandkids, and being single and doing that, you don't always have an opportunity to get out. I'm going to go back to work with these characters that I used to work with, and it's been great. One of the beautiful things about the people I worked with, at least the majority of them, is they were true to their character. We met when we were in our 20s. Now we're 60-ish and older, and we all seem to be the same as we were in our 20s. And it was just a testimony to me that they were just genuinely who they were, because they're not having to act now. They're sincere, hardworking, honest people who do the best they can in a job that a lot of people would never want to do.
And if there could ever be a definition that would fit Bradley Smith more perfectly, it would be exactly how he just described his coworkers that he came out of retirement to work with again. His job now is a little bit different compared to what he used to do when he first started. Now, he works for a private company that contracts with ICE, the immigration network, and he basically flies as security personnel back and forth on flights transferring immigrants back to or from their destination or their home country, which he doesn't think is very fancy.
Nothing extravagant or, really glamorous, because you go there, you turn the inmates or detainees over to the government there, and they deal with them. And periodically we stay overnight, like in Peru, Brazil, or someplace like that. Pilots have to rest. We get there. We get to spend the evenings hanging out, eating, buying things to bring back with.
All in all, you would almost never suspect that this casually jovial sounding man had been through something so heart-wrenching. And as he discusses the family dynamics, you'll start to hear a change. Subtle, but present. And probably because we have already heard the story of what actually happens, or the rendition of it that was given to the newspapers. So you can understand why speaking about the family and the dynamics from the past could start to affect the way he tells the story.
My dad was a very, very hard-working fellow. He did his 20 years with the military, and then taught for 23 years at Alexandria Senior High. Laying around was just not an option.
And that didn't stop with his dad, his mother, or his 3 brothers, or himself. All of the members of this family went on to be productive, well-rounded humans. And one has to wonder how that is possible after you hear the story that Brad is now going to tell.
What's interesting about, I'll speak about myself, in this case here, that Friday before I was still at LC. I went to my classes. We were church custodians at our church when it was over on Bayou Rapides. I went in that day to clean and buff and mop some floors and get set up for Sunday. And I had a date that night, and then I dropped her off about 11 o'clock and went back to work. I worked at the church that night till about 2:30. We could work at any hour over at the church, and so I could go to class, work, or go to class and do whatever, and then go back and work as long as the place was ready for the meetings whenever they were scheduled. So that's what I had done. I had picked up about 6 o'clock. Oh no, let me back up. It was another thing. Went to college, went to school that day, went to work, and then 5 that evening on that Friday, I had my last meeting with our congregation bishop to finalize the paperwork for my mission, church missions. That was the night that we finalized. I signed everything and was ready to go. The paperwork, and they sent it into Salt Lake City to the church headquarters, and then I would get my mission call. It was about 3 weeks later that I got my call to Sicily. Anyhow, completed the paperwork, went and picked up. We went on our date, took her back, had a rule, 11 o'clock. As late as we needed to be out. The date was away. And I went back to work. And like I said, I left about 2:30 that morning. I got home just before 3, probably 5 to 3. And Mom and Daddy's house is a split-level home. We still own it. It's on the market, but it's a split-level home. I came in through, I had a bedroom door that went outside. So I would park, and I came through my door into the house. And, back then, we didn't lock doors. Nobody did. Nobody locked them. So I came through my door. I had a bathroom downstairs, and I was standing there brushing my teeth and washing my face, and Connie came in about 10 minutes later. So 5 minutes after 3, very protective of her. And she started to tell me about her evening. She was all excited, and I fussed at her. I'll be honest, I fussed at her because she came in so late. So she stopped talking. While we were talking, I do remember this extremely well. And like I said, this stuff It's so burned into memory that I have no doubt that I'm not mistaken about any detail that I can tell you. I'll tell you if I'm not real clear on something. We had several cats, 2 in the house. One was my cat, Smokey. The downstairs stairs that went to the center level of the home were concrete, so couldn't hear anything in there. The stairs going up to where Connie's bedroom, my brother's bedroom, and my parents' bedroom was at were wooden, and you could hear the cats running up and down the stairs. Just the soft thud on the steps. Connie and I were talking down in my bathroom, and during that time, I heard what I thought was the cats going upstairs. It was not. It was Bryan, who had been hiding in the center level of the home in the dark in our living room, creeping up the stairs when he heard me talking with Connie. He went and hid in her closet. And again, I didn't think anything about it. She goes on upstairs. I go into the kitchen. I made a bowl of raisin bran. Went back downstairs and I ate it in my bedroom. This happened pretty quickly. I mean, it wasn't a big bowl. I just was hungry and ate something real quick and laid back. I remember laying back on my bed with my legs hanging off. And I was wearing a pair of running shorts. And I'll tell you these details because they actually bring them up in court. It showed pictures. And I was in good shape. I mean, I was athletic, still worked out. I was almost 19, short of a month of being 19. I lay back on the bed and I heard a scream. Now, I don't do horror movies. I had a very legitimate reason for not doing it. I didn't know what PTSD was until a couple years later, but the scream was a scream that it was a shrill scream, so loud, so intense, so piercing. It was like she was in the room with me, even though she was two flights of stairs to the upper level. And I heard something, my mom say something about blood. Well, Connie had chronic bloody noses, and they could be severe. So I thought, scream, what the devil? So I ran up my flight of stairs. The hall light was on. And as I came up those stairs, I got to the top stairs and Bryan Brown crossed right in front of me. I mean, within a foot, I could have reached out and grabbed his pants were open in the front. He was holding them with his left hand.
So I did interrupt him at this point. I had to ask if he had immediately recognized Bryan Brown or if he had some kind of concealing mask or anything of the sort, because this was a part of the story that didn't make any sense to me. He went into a house that was fully occupied with all intentions of being caught? Was he planning on killing everyone? What was he thinking? Unfortunately, we won't be able to answer that question. But Bradley did answer mine on whether he immediately recognized Bryan or not.
Absolutely. They had a full profile. You know, ironically about all of this was on Saturday morning. 2 Wednesdays prior to that, Connie and I drove him and his sister to church. Matter of fact, the night he killed her, she had gone by, there was a little gas station that's across from Marlar Ford. It's been long closed. Back then, it was one of the only stores around. We used to ride our bikes to it. She had gone in the store that night on the way to her senior party, her school party, class party, and he apparently asked her and to go out with him, and she declined. She had plans. That was something we learned after the fact. She had gone there to get gas, and he was working in the gas station there. I asked her out. She told me she had plans, but I can't see her having said that. Yeah, he couldn't take no. We didn't know till after the fact that he'd been in and out of our house many, many times. He'd taken pictures and whatnot. That was kind of that's one of those things that leaves a permanent effect. Yeah, it's when they come in the house, last one in the door, lock the door. I'm sorry, just lock the door. It's not a big deal. It's not, if we're not going back out, and at night, definitely check the doors. things that we didn't do. Back when he came down the stairs, I knew him instantly. And I thought, why is Bryan Brown? And at this point, still, I'm thinking Connie's been hurt, bloody nose. That's the severity that I'm thinking. Typically, we don't think along the lines of those kind of things happening. Yeah, I'm thinking bloody nose. Hey, Connie has bloody nose. Maybe he hit her. And I didn't see the knife. I think it was, I'm not sure which hand it was in. It might have been in his left hand, which you'd think I would have seen it, but he was moving so fast. I just looked at his face, and I came up the stairs, and I could see he was holding his pants as he ran, and I was in his face. It was so quick, but it was right there, and I could have grabbed it. So he went out the backsliding glass door of the house and out to Hermitage Road and started running down. He lived down at the end of Hermitage and to the left. So, 5-minute stroll, easily. He ran down a couple of street lights, and he turned with one of the lights to his back. So all I could really do is see a silhouette at that point. And I saw his, I said, what are you doing? And his left shoulder dropped, and it looked like a punch coming. So I blocked what I thought was a punch with my right arm. By that, was able to raise my arm just above my shoulder. And the knife went through my arm. He was trying to hit me in the neck. So I was blessed to raise my arm. I still wear the scar. If I pick up things, you can see the hernia pushing through. And then when I realized what he had done, and then he took off, he turned, he faced me. He never said a word. I was a runner. So catching him was not a big deal. But you made him feel threatened. I'm like, I was wearing running shorts and nothing else. And the light was to his advantage. He could see, obviously, I had nothing in my hands. And he was going to kill me too, It wasn't his initial plan, but it was a convenient thing for him to do at that point. So anyways, I just it was just such a reflex. I saw the shoulder drop, it looked like a punch coming, and I blocked it. It ended up being a knife. Then it occurred to me, the knife. So he runs onto the house. Mind you, he goes home and puts the knife up and goes to bed. Like, no big deal.
At this point, he's realized that his sister probably isn't just suffering from a nosebleed and runs back to the house. And what he sees there when he arrives is beyond heart-wrenching. And his retelling is not for the smaller ears or younger audience, so please be advised.
And run through the front door. By this time, Mom or Dad had opened the front door. Sure was Mom. Because when I ran through the front door and looked up the stairs, my dad was trying to carry Connie downstairs. And she was saturated in blood from head to toe, and he was covered in blood with blood on the floor, wall. It was just, the carpet was just soaked in it. When he had severed that primary blood supply, and my dad tried, her chest was filling up with, and when my dad tried to pick her up and cradle her, he just forced the blood out of her chest. So she was slipping out of my dad's hands while trying to get her down the stairs. And our little brothers were, fortunately, some neighbors across the street came over and took care of them. I drove my mom and dad and Connie to the hospital. She took her last breath right before we crossed the Oak Allen Bridge in front of Beulah. I remember calling to her, thinking that you could kind of hear me take that last deep sigh. She was dead. So by the time we got her there, it was, just a matter of interpretation of it. Last time I saw her, I was walking by in the ER, and she was on a table in one of the rooms, and I see her body lying there. I remember my dad falling to his knees and holding on to me, crying. What do I do? What do I do? A lot of it's fuzzy.
And as anyone could ever begin to speculate, of course, things got fuzzy at this point. His memory 41 years later is nearly photographic. But then things start to kind of blur.
Of course, our home was a crime scene, so we went out to some friends of ours who lived out on Bayou Rapids.
At this point, Brad and his entire family were kind of ducking the press and trying to stay out of the media headlines, and understandably so. From what I understand, and I think I mentioned this in the podcast episode, her funeral was standing room only. And they needed to be away from that. So they hid out, and like he said, it gets blurry for him after that. So I ask him more specific questions surrounding the knife and his wound, because those two things were also very vague in all of the research I had done. Specifically, I asked him the size of the knife and well, he had already mentioned that the knife had gone through and through in his arm, and I was curious as to what kind of damage that had done to his arm specifically, and he seemed to almost gloss over the fact that he had had a knife plunge through and through his arm because of the situation, which anybody who's even, whether you've experienced something like that or you've heard a secondhand, adrenaline does crazy things. So he drove his family with his sister drawing her last breath and never mentions his arm again until I ask him, like I bring it up. It's almost like it's not even there, not like it didn't even happen, but you have to know that that had to have been severe. Just based on his description. Listen.
It was through and through. It was, let me think back, it was a kitchen knife. It was probably, it was a standard butcher knife length. So I'm figuring the tip came out, it was probably about a 1-inch blade. The tip came through the other side, not the hole. Anyways, apparently, you had mentioned the defensive wound. There was a possible defensive wound. She had one in her hand. She tried to grab the first time he tried to stab her. And the second one was the one that was successful in her chest. And she crawled across. She screamed. My dad opened the door, and she was on her hands and knees crawling over to me. She collapsed into his arms.
And here, just to clarify, I asked, was this secondhand knowledge or was this something he saw with his own eyes? And he clarified again that he never made it all the way up the stairs. He pursued the intruder.
Chased him out. I didn't see her until I came back in. He was trying to carry her down the stairs. Those are things you don't forget. And,
again, just to show you the strength of his character and the will and belief in his faith, what anyone would allow to completely shut them down, he didn't.
when I came home off my mission, I wanted to go back and just kind of fill in a couple of things. People, I used to get a lot of questions. Now, I won't speak for my brothers so much. I will tell you what I do remember. Their minds were young. Some of the things they do remember clearly. I can tell you some things that I was told I didn't witness, but I have no doubt that they were true based on some conversations with at least one of the brothers, one young, oldest, just under me. But no, after Connie was killed, I went ahead and served my church mission.
And in my mind, it clicked that he would have been on his mission when Bryan escaped. So I had to ask, how did that affect him being on a mission?
When that happened, I was on my mission. And I got a call from the man over the missionaries in this part of Texas. They called him the mission president. President Tyler called me up. It was unusual to get a call from him. He called me late one evening. And he said, Elder Smith, I need to tell you something. And he said, Bryan Brown escaped. And they don't know where he's at. When we're on our missions, they usually have our addresses up. in the church so people can write letters. We're afraid that maybe somehow he had gotten my address. I was the only material witness for the trial. He tried to come for me. Truth be known, he passed. I was in San Antonio at the time, so he did pass somewhere in Texas. But anyways, I basically was told I had to hide out. I mean, I could still perform my duties as missionary, but if anybody called looking for me, or if they saw us see strangers, they would not know. They would not knowing. So basically,
You were in a witness protection program.
Pretty much. So when he was finally captured later that year, I had my life again. But my missionary companions, there was 4 of us living in an apartment. They didn't know anything about my situation. Never made a scene out of it. I still don't. I never have. People will come to me and go, like when I started working at Oakdale years and years later. Over that 25-year period that I worked there, people would go. And even it happens now. No, Smith. Are you related to Connie Smith? We'd be working together for a long time before they'd figure out that it was me. I went ahead and served. They said, you don't have to go. I said, no, I'm committed to it. I'm going. So she was killed on the 14th, and I left on my church mission on 28th of July. They reassigned me to the Texas San Antonio Spanish mission to keep me stateside. And the trial ended up not happening until after I got off my mission. So either way, it was still was committed to go, even though I didn't get to go to Sicily. But she...
And here we start to get into the reports, the trials, types, information. And even though they tried to make some kind of bad insinuation, all it does is lead Brad into telling us about the amazing relationship that he shared with his sister.
They tried to discredit me, to even imply that Connie and I had some kind of romantic relationship.
Yeah, of course they did.
Each other. I thought, you sick SOBs. Connie and I were very close. We were more like twins. When I say we were close, we were very close. When you move a lot and you're shy children, we double dated in high school. We'd go out together. It wasn't no big deal. We knew each other weren't going to do anything stupid, so we could go out and have fun together and go on dates together. And matter of fact, I drove the car. When she was on homecoming court her senior year, I drove the little convertible. Matter of fact, I've got some pictures. I drove the car for the homecoming. What else? I escorted her to several things. I mean, we just were close. Nobody knew that. I mean, it was not a secret. People at church knew it. People at school knew it. People anywhere. I mean, we loved being together. We got along very well. Well, I felt bad. I've lived with that guilt ever since, because the last words that we had together, I was fussing at her instead of being excited for her, because Connie was not a drinker or smoker or doper or anything of the kind. She just was a clean, fun kid. 41 years later, it still bothers me that, her last exchange with me, I squelched her excitement and fussed at her for being late, being out so late.
And as you guys can imagine, and the people who know me more closely, I didn't let him continue on very long in saying this, because regardless of the last conversation, I can tell just from the brief interactions that we've had, the love and caring and just absolute respect and all of the things that you could possibly feel for someone that you love or care about. He had that for his sister, and there was no doubt in my mind that she had it, and I told him as much.
I'm sure sometimes and I do believe sometimes the veil between mortality and those who have passed on it could be thin. They can see that you did love them even though they've passed on.
And this next bit came across prophetic, but also a little eerie, foreboding. But at the same time, I've had these moments in my life where I've been in a situation and thought, what would I do if, and insert here. So I felt this story that he is about to tell everyone deeply, because we never know. We never know which moments will be our last and what memories we'll have seared into our minds for the rest of our existence.
Oh my goodness. I can remember the February before she was killed. You know, I don't know, premonitions, call it what you may. But I can remember in church, second first Sunday of February, 83. Sitting there, she was speaking in church that day. I remember while she was at the podium thinking, what would happen? What would it be like if something happened? I remember getting really teary-eyed about it because I could never imagine life without her.
Right.
So when it happened, I got firsthand understanding of what it would be like to be with her. And, oh goodness, you really can't explain that to kind of hurt people. But
and we kind of moved into the world of how far-reaching a tragedy like this. It's so vast, and most people don't think about it. But here's just a touch of how far this goes.
The effect that it had on the family, at least for me. My three brothers had each other. They were very close to each other. They were little demons in the neighborhood. They were mischievous, trust me. They had each other, and Connie and I had each other.
Right. And
Mom and Dad had each other. And when Connie was killed, I felt disconnected somewhat from the family because they still had each other, and I didn't feel like I kind of fit anymore. And then I guess I looked at my children were much, much older than their first cousins, brothers being much younger. So their cousins would be much, much younger. And I had thought over the years how my children were cheated because they didn't have first cousins on my side they could be close to. Mm-hmm. And they would talk about it. There's nothing for us to do when we go there. All the younger cousins get to hang out together because they were 10 years younger than my kids. That's probably the one of those things that if I was ever angry and Brown about something, it was that it not just cheated me out of many, many, many years of memories with somebody that I loved, but my children lost out on. It affected their wanting to really go home and hang out because there was nobody for them to play with like the other cousins had. Being married helped me, at least have somebody there by my side. Still not like having Connie around.
Right.
One of the things that I'd mentioned about an officer from work years later coming to my office. I remember I was sitting in my office, and it wasn't uncommon for staff to call psychology and just want to come and vent, just kind of keep it off the record and just have somebody there to for a little bit. I got a call from this one guy, and we talked. We were friendly with each other. He was kind of a quiet soul, so not a big talker, but very, very friendly to me. One day he called me and he said, "Hey, can I come talk to you?" I said, "Sure." So I thought he was coming to, say, "Man, I'm so sick of this lieutenant," blah, blah, blah. And he came in and sat down, and he just didn't have any. He just kind of stared at me for a minute. I said, "You okay?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you want to talk?" He goes, "Yeah, I want to talk to you about something for a long time." By this time, we'd worked together for 12 years.
Wow.
And said, "You know where I used to work before I came here?" And I said, "I think I can go." He goes, "Yeah." He said, Bryan Brown. I looked up at him. I said, "I sure do." He goes, "Well, I do too." As a matter of fact, I'm the one that processed them in the coma. Really? It's like, okay. Here's something I've been wanting to share with you. He says, I don't want to upset you or anything. I said, well, go ahead, just tell me. He said one of the things he had in his property was, so what was in it? He said his photo album was his personal property was of drawings and pictures of men having sex with dead people. He says, did that make sense? Did that seem like a possibility? I said, yeah. I heard something similar said back in the days when they were investigating. He was going to kill her, whether he was going to have sex with her dead or alive, even then.
Right.
It just makes you wonder, like, what do you think? The family's not going to know.
And just like that, we were back to questions that we have no answers to. The why, the what, and just like I want answers to all of my cases, obviously, and of course, Brad wanted answers about his sister.
I tried to actually go talk to him around 99, but they didn't go. Associate Ward declined my ability to talk to him. And it wasn't I just wanted to understand what he was thinking. I explained that to him. Now, in a lot of ways, I don't want Connie's, even though it's connected with such a hard thing. I don't want her to be forgotten. I don't want her death to go unnoticed. And I think people do need to learn from traumas that other people experience and deaths of other people. I mean, it put an awareness in the community that needed to be put there. We were complacent. We got laid back about, door locking and lights and, hey, why are you in my house? Anybody that's close to me knows when we go to a restaurant and sit down, I never sit with my back to the door. And they just know they just don't even question. And it's a lifestyle for me now. It's not something I make a big deal out of other than when the grandkids move in. I say, hey, in my house, when we come in and we're the last person in, we lock. Because home invasions are real. Craziness exists.
And that more than anything is what we want to convey and for people to take away from this is that message. Bad things do happen. Bad people are everywhere. If there are humans, there is bad, there is evil, there is the possibility of evil. Every true crime ever, if you watch the news interview, what is the first thing the person being interviewed says? Oh, I never thought it could happen here. It can happen anywhere. Please don't forget that.
I'm an absolute bear when it comes to my kids. I'm a small guy. I'm only 5'5", but I am a monster when it comes to my kids.
Absolutely.
I don't even play games with it. My daughter, I have embarrassed her more than a few times, even as an adult. For what I've experienced in life, and then spend 25 years working with criminal thinkers. I can sniff a turd out. Yeah, when it's your life, you just kind of say, nope, that's not a good person to be with. I told her one time, I said, you want to do me a favor and help keep me out of jail? Quit picking people that I'm going to kill somebody over. You're going to get me locked up.
Which I thought was great. Every father should be a father bear and be worried. But before I let him get off the phone, because we had over 2 hours of conversation that night, and I had to ask, what was the one all-encompassing favorite memory or pastime that he had with Connie, and if he would share it with us?
I enjoyed sitting with Connie. She would play and I would sing.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I have the piano that she played in practice. It's a little 5'6" Mason and Hamlin baby grand piano.
Oh, wow.
It's the one thing when my mom decided to sell our house. said, the oldest, this is the only thing I want. I could care less about anything else in the house. I want the piano.
Right.
So I moved it down here last year. I sit and play it myself some, but I used to love just to we just casually sit down and she'd play and I'd sing with her.
And on his feelings about Bryan, the man who murdered his sister, who took her from not only him, but his children and his grandchildren.
You know, I've never hated the man. I'm angry that he took my sister. I mean, I've never felt hatred towards him. I get a little flack about that. It was bad. It was hard enough losing her. I didn't want to have to shoulder hatred. There's some things you can't control, like the missing and the longing and the hurt. Those things I really couldn't control, but I could control hatred. Yeah, he'd already taken enough. And you know, I believe that he's going to, you know, and so he'll have to answer to that. My job that I have to answer for is, did I treat him as the Savior and my Father in heaven treated me?
Which is very likely far better than I could ever feel or think. And maybe I don't know, after 40 some odd years, maybe it would be different, but I don't know that I could ever be that graceful. But I completely agree and understand that allowing yourself to hold on to hatred is overwhelming and it's exhausting, and the healthiest thing to do is to let it go. And if it's your favor, if it's your cup of tea, let go and let God. I've heard that a lot. Or if it's just let go and live.
I remember about 5 years after she passed, I was married, expecting my first child. And I remember one day I realized all of a sudden I felt this physical weight off of my shoulders that I hadn't always was there. And I talked with my ex-wife about it and said, what's different? And I really think the conclusion that I came to, and that I still believe is accurate, is that I was able to let more go, any resentment. You know, it's kind of hard to explain. When you've experienced something like that, you do feel like there's this physical weight pulling you down. Depression, call it. Anxiety, call it. Sadness, whatever. I just remember getting up about 5 years after it happened, and I felt it was directly related to Connie's passing.
I think we can all agree that children are miracles. And according to Brad, his first unborn child had allowed him to make room emotionally, physically, and mentally for the love that he needed to give to this unborn baby, and to be able to share that with his children from this point forward. Having that helped him move his life forward and to let go of the grief and the cloud. And that got us talking about Connie and what she would have been like as a mother. And I tend to agree. She would have been fantastic.
Fantastic mother. She'd been a very devoted wife, too, and talented. She would have been the package deal, the rock solid man.
And I did ask about the situation where Bryan's still alive, he's still in Angola, and not surprisingly, he'd been asked before.
Yeah, I get that from people. Where's Bryan? Still in Angola. Somebody had posed the idea, well, what if he breaks out again? He just come to the house. It won't turn out pretty. I don't wish any ugly on him. He's got his, raised my children to be, some people call it paranoid. It's a lifestyle of conscious awareness around your surroundings. The situational awareness is something that we preach in the prison system. I had an old correctional officer when I started in 90. He pulled me aside one day, because I looked like I was about 15 years old. And I was in place, and I'm a little guy. And he said, listen, if you ever walk into a unit, or you walk towards a crowd of inmates, something doesn't seem quite right. You don't need to know what it is. Just back up calmly and leave the area and go get help. And that stuck with me my whole life since then. Is if something doesn't feel right, you don't need to know what it is. Back away and reassess. And if you can't figure it out, you don't need to go wherever this uneasy feeling's at. Don't go there. Go a different route. You don't need to know why. I've lived that way ever since, and you can do it in a way that nobody realizes that's what you're doing, so you don't look like you're freaking out, and just keep talking and acting normal and move on. Thank you so much, Kelly. Look, y'all have a good night, okay?
You do the same. Thank you so much. Now, this next part, I removed completely from the original order in our conversation because I felt like it needed to be the focus. What you take away from this episode, from this podcast, from this story as a whole. Connie doesn't need to be forgotten.
I don't want her to be forgotten. Connie doesn't need to be forgotten. I don't want her to be worshipped or anything like that. She wouldn't want that either. No. But she was an incredible person who had, hopes and dreams, potential, and they were cut short. At least I can do as a brother is keep her memory alive, and what a good person she was.
This has been an Elf Audio production.